It's tense time in America now, isn't it? Especially for those of us with melanin. I want to say racism is getting out of hand or that it's always been that way, but it's really just one symptom of a much greater issue. See, when enough people come together, spend enough time around each other, these unspoken rules of interaction kick in, and those rules sort of take on lives of their own. Inevitably, power structures emerge, and people either want to head them, assimilate into them, or overtake them. That's just the way social organization works. Here in the US, overt racism is well on the rise again, but in countries where there's little to no racial diversity, the same disparities and aggressive stances taken towards black and brown people here are being directed towards people over there, usually the poor and indigent. There's always some sort of class system, isn't there? India had the caste system, and in other countries it can be a regional, religious, or heritage thing. It all really boils down to status beliefs, right? It seems humans are always looking for ways to differentiate themselves, separate themselves from the pack. Basically, people want ways to make themselves and those they view as extensions of self special, so that ultimately they're worthy of rewards, comforts, freedoms, satisfaction, and even life itself ahead of other individuals or groups of people. Every few years or so, some politician in some country comes along and in so many words or less tells people, I'm gonna make it socially acceptable for you to bully groups of people you outrank again. And the public just eats that shit up. And it's always masked with really deceptive language, like tough on crime, or war on drugs, or make us great again, or some stupid shit like that. Statements that in some translate into, we're going to fix social order by setting things right again. We're going to send people who belong at the bottom back to the bottom, and people who belong in the middle up to the middle, and then make it so that a few from the middle get to rise to the top. That's literally the whole message. And it always works out so that the lower middle class gets weaponized against the bottom, and they attack the bottom with scores of contempt and righteous indignation. They get all revved up to bully the lower class so that ultimately they serve as a static barrier between the bottom and the top. See, it's easy to label racism as the problem, but that's just one version of the same systemic phenomenon occurring over and over and over again. Stratification systems. Listen, there are always more people in the middle than there are at the top, and significantly more people at the bottom than there are in the middle. Added to that, there are always more people in the lower middle than there are in the upper middle. That's just the way stratification systems work. And regardless of nation or social context, the lower middle class is generally charged to beat the shit out of the bottom. Alright? That's how you keep shit in line, man. That's how societies remain intact, or so we've all been led to believe. See, the really fucked up thing is, usually, the public figure who turns the lower middle class against the bottom class generally crushes the lower middle class and sends most of them down to the bottom when everything's all said and done. Let me be clear here. The lower middle class gets crushed by big politics, and then the upper middle class gets divided so that a few move up while most move back down to the middle. This is a budget-related principle of social organization. It would play out on any planet in the exact same way. It isn't as salient in this country right now because of how the debt system is structured, but it's a universal phenomenon nonetheless. But basically, the marching orders given to the lower middle class are in essence, you in the lower middle class, you better beat those worthless motherfuckers back because they're trying to take your shit. That's literally the entire message behind every alt-right political campaign, politician, and platform. Beat them back to save your shit. And the public just eats this shit up. Like Gen Pop will sign their lives, rights, liberty, freedom, and in some cases, the lives and futures of their children away just so they can feel morally superior to people they get to shit on. People are afraid to be in last place, and they will fight, lie, cheat, and kill to make sure someone is in line behind them. And here in the US, the most common determinant of class and status is race. That's the first thing people associate with your social status. How smart you are, how capable and deserving of opportunities, considerations, rewards, and freedoms you are should all somehow be linked to the color of your skin. It's written into the subtext of American culture. Well, Donald King, if you know all that, then why are you pissed at racists? Why am I pissed at racists? That is an excellent question. See, the thing is, when I see racism in America, when I see these racists out here being petty tyrants, I get pissed because I know exactly who and what I'm looking at. What I see is a bunch of people who desperately want groups to define everyone so that the accomplishments of a few who look like them can qualify them for rewards and considerations they didn't and couldn't earn on their own. See, if I can say Donald is bad because he looks like Tyrell and Tyrell went to prison, but I'm good because I look like Elon Musk and he built a rocket, it saved me the trouble of having to do the things Elon Musk did to gain his lot in life. In terms of acuity, any person who wants to categorically define people is very middle of the road. They don't have any real mental talent or strength about them. They don't have any transformative ideas to offer the world and won't bring any measure of betterment or any real solutions to anything. They don't think in terms of solutions, but instead in terms of glory and blame. Short of violence, intimidation, and conspiracy, they have very little to offer outside of marginal labor-related and or survival skills or skills for exploitation. And see, that doesn't just apply to racists, it applies to any and everyone who seeks to define people according to groups. A bunch of sycophants and cowards. And even though I understand all of this in mechanism, I'm still pissed at racists though. But probably not for the reasons you think. In fact, I'm sure not for the reasons you think. See, the reason I'm pissed at racists is because I fucking get it. I fucking get you. If you're a racist watching this video, then I'm pissed because I know you. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I was a foster kid. I was small, weak, frail. I had asthma. I was physically uncoordinated. I was an easy target for bullying for kids and adults alike. One particular adult in my life used to call me Professor Donnie Butt because, apparently 8-year-old black kids weren't supposed to know or use big words. And wait, before you think that this is a pity party, just shh. Listen. Just listen. There's always lots of kids coming and going through the foster home I was in. We had adult siblings living in the house with us too, so it was always a full house. Inevitably, as I mentioned earlier, we formed our own little society among ourselves, complete with its own stratification system. It started off as big kids versus little kids, but before long, it became foster kids versus real kids. And just so we're clear here, it's nobody's fault. I'm not blaming anybody in my family for how social structures were formed or emerged between us. This is just how social organization works. New foster kids came and went, but my older biological brother and me, we stuck around for years. I remained a target for most of those years. When it came time to get in trouble for things, I always got more than my share of punishment. I remember this one time, my then foster brother, he attacked me for some reason in the back of my parents' station wagon. He was always attacking me. He bullied shit out of me for years, but he attacked me, and then both of us got beat for fighting, even though pretty much everybody saw I didn't do anything. I didn't even try to defend myself. I couldn't defend myself. He was stronger than me. But that's just the way it went, man. I got targeted by both the power structure and then the individual players alike. That was just easy pickings. Fast forward a few years and foster kids kept coming. I got a little bigger. My biological brother and I, we got adopted into the family, and we were official yet unofficial real kids. That was literally a term that was common in the household, since well before we were adopted. But as the new kids came in, all of that pent-up rage in me from years of being abused, even before I got to this house, started to manifest in the form of bullying. For about 3, maybe 4 years, I did some really mean things to a lot of kids. And yeah, I could have probably, qualified it by, hey, I was a kid, or I can make excuses for my behavior based on my circumstance, or attempt to explain it all in gradation. But nah, fuck that. I was a little shit as a fucking little asshole, man. See, that was the way it was supposed to be, though, wasn't it? In my mind, you know what I'm saying? Because back then I assumed gaining that status of being a real kid entitled me to special considerations and preferential treatment ahead of newer foster kids. That's how it worked before, didn't it? I mean, I was considerably equal to my adoptive siblings. Wasn't I? New fosters came in and they got shitted on. They felt the burn of our little society and the power structure it came down from. That's just how shit was supposed to go, or so I thought. See, most of the foster kids got it from different people in different ways, but I was right there making sure they got it from me too. The word foster kid began to take on this sort of moralistic derogatory meaning, and a lot of times you'd hear statements like stupid foster kid or things along this line. And maybe my siblings would contest the degree to which these sorts of occurrences happen, but I think I remember most of it quite vividly. We were just kids and the product of different social influences and circumstances and whatnot. So again, there's no one to blame here. My parents aren't to blame, the kids aren't to blame. No one in my family is to blame. It's just how social structures work. Funny thing happened in terms of the treatment of the real kids though. You know what I'm saying? The kids who got treated better or embraced by the power structure were usually less aggressive towards the foster kids than those of us who were underhill, and you know, they tended to excel in like school, academically and whatnot. But yo, listen, let me get to my point real quick before I go off on too many tangents. You see, I was a fucking coward back then. I'm not ashamed to admit that now. I can clearly see how much of a coward I was in retrospect. My sense of security came from knowing someone else was hurting worse than me. Let me repeat that. My sense of security was tied directly to the idea of someone being worse off than I was. Back then, I desperately wanted to believe that I was entitled to inclusion, love, and consideration ahead of the newer foster kids because of some status bullshit that didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. I wasn't better than them, but I was always searching for reasons and ways to prove I was. And that shit made me so fucking petty. I would just look for reasons and ways to justify being a prick. See, when you want to bully somebody, you never need good reasons to do it. Rapists don't need good reasons to rape. Murderers don't need good reasons to murder. They looked at me wrong. He raised his hand like he was going to hit me. Just look at what she's wearing. Just flip that around though. I had to shoot him. I had to beat him mercilessly. You know, it looked like he was reaching for something. You know how they are. He's a thug. Look at what he's wearing. Look at his dress. See, when you're a social predator, you're always looking for excuses to justify predatory attitudes, actions, and behaviors. Listen, I didn't even like religion back then, but I'd still be on some stupid bullshit like, they don't take religious meetings seriously, so they deserve to suffer, or they're dirty, or some other stupid, cowardly shit. There were times they'd get spankings and I'd literally be happy they were being hurt. It's sickening to think about what a little faggot I was back then. And don't trip off me using that word. It's not related to homosexuality. Like, it takes way more courage to be a gay person than it does to be a little faggot. That's what I was. I was a little faggot. I think, you know what? I think South Park got it right when they framed it as basically being, you know, a loud, attention-seeking little sycophant, a petty tyrant hiding behind the group who thinks being marginally included in the power structure makes them tough when it really doesn't. I don't know if y'all remember the original Transformers cartoon, but Starscream. Yeah, Starscream is the example what I'm talking about. Megatron! Oh my god, I hated that motherfucker. Listen, I wasn't always physically violent. A lot of times it was just my intentions towards the foster kids. Like, a lot of times I just went out of my way to make life difficult for them for no reason at all. I was always ready to believe the absolute worst about them. Something went missing, oh, I bet it was a foster kid. Or if there was any sort of unrest among the larger group, oh, it must be the foster kids. You see, I was too much of a chicken shit to realize or admit it back then, but the worse they looked was the better I thought I looked by comparison. The more moral and fucked up they seemed was the more deserving of opportunities and inclusion I seemed or looked by comparison. And I want you to remember, I started out as a foster kid. I used to be a stupid foster kid. I remember how threatened and insecure I used to feel whenever a new foster kid got attention or recognition for something. Maybe they had a talent I didn't have or did well in school or something. You know, a new kid came in the house and someone said something positive about him or called him cute or something. And I got jealous, I got bitter and angry. Like, how dare them threaten my place in the power structure? How dare them? Seriously, like what the fuck is that shit? See, in my mind, I put in all this work. I took all my lumps, I rose through the ranks, but when it all boiled down to it in the end, my status as an adopted kid didn't mean shit. New kid could just swoop in and take what I'd suffered to gain through years of being shitted on. So yeah, I'm not proud. For about 3-4 years of my life, I was a cowardly bully. And to be honest, I really hope it was only 3 or 4. I really hope it was only 3 or 4. I just wanted to feel morally superior to somebody, you know? I just wanted to feel safer, more valuable than them, even if it meant robbing them of safety and value myself. I remember this one time, one of the adults threatened one of the foster kids with violence from me, and I never felt so proud in my young life. I was like, yeah, I'm a valuable contributor. I'm an asset. I matter now. It felt so great to be thought of as an enforcer for the power structure, because honestly, that was my aspiration at the time, to be an enforcer, to be seen as a valuable contributor. I wanted to be tough, Van Damme tough. You know what I'm saying? I remember one day, my brother Alonzo called me on my bullshit though. Like, he embarrassed the fuck out of me too. He was like, you're all tough against us, but I'll never see you try that mess with TJ. And he was so right. I never tried any of that shit against TJ. Any of it. See, I never fought people who could hit back just as hard or harder than I could. And that's how you know when you're a coward. See, people think cowards are afraid of conflict, but no, that's not true. Cowards love violence so long as they're the ones doling it out. Cowards pick fights they think they can win. They're ready, willing, and just waiting to lord it over people who won't fight back. They pick fights with people they think they can get away with lashing out against. That's what internet trolls do, right? Fucking cowards. Hey, I'm behind this wall of anonymity. I can do whatever the fuck I want and nobody can stop me. I'm fucking badass. But when you're standing in front of them, it's a much different story, isn't it? And back then, if you asked me about it, I would have sworn up and down I was a brave person. Because cowards think bullying is brave. But there's a difference between bravery and cowardice, isn't it? Somehow in our society, cowardice is being confused for bravery for some reason. Listen, bravery stands up against tyranny, regardless of where it's coming from, and cowardice only wants to mob up behind and defend tyranny. Bravery is selfless, and cowardice is selfish. Bravery wants equal treatment for all, while cowardice only wants advantages for self and group. Bravery does what's needed, and cowardice does whatever's convenient. Cowards won't fight anyone or anything that can fight them back on fair terms. They will only fight from advantageous positions, or when there's some sort of contest for authority they think they've got a good chance at winning, and even then they're only fueled by status beliefs or feelings of deserving and moral superiority. See, as long as a coward has special skills or weapons or anything that gives them the upper hand, they're acting like they're fucking tough shit. They go around creating or looking for stupid contests to win. Yo, you ever see one of those YouTube videos where some random white dude trains for months or years at a certain skill and then goes into the hood and upstages some unsuspecting black person who probably hasn't even invested a fraction of the time that person put into developing their skill set? You ever see that? You know that one dude who trains in mixed martial arts for years, then goes into the hood and then beats up some average Joe while a bunch of internet cowards cheer him on like, yeah, you show those nigger thugs. Kind of fucking cowardly shit is that? Yo, I used to look for stupid contests to win. I did it because that's how I legitimated my beliefs in moral superiority. It's all so fucking weak. But back to my living situation. Obviously, I didn't have total free reign in the situation, so it wasn't like I was beating on the kids every day, but I did do a bunch of cowardly shit to intimidate them constantly, you know? And listen, some of these kids came from some really, really messed up circumstances. But I never wanted to think about their circumstances or factor that shit into their behaviors because I needed to see myself as morally superior. I wanted to use any and everything I could get my grubby little hands on to create and promote status beliefs, this notion that I was somehow better than them. Which brings us right back to racist. See, I've seen a bunch of pictures of lynch mobs throughout the years. You know, all those men and women smiling for the camera and patting themselves on the back for torturing and killing people who they knew couldn't fight them back on fair terms. They're all smiling like, yeah, we showed those niggers who's in charge, put the fear of God in them motherfuckers. And then they turn right back around the very next day and go right back to getting bullied by the system themselves. They still had to pay their mortgages and their taxes. They still had to worry about that year's crop. You know, women who had few if any rights back then probably still got beaten on and raped and treated like domestic slaves by their husbands, who constantly cheated on them with their secretaries, who they probably raped too. See, every person in those photos was tough as shit against people who couldn't fight back on fair terms. More than likely, after the fact, they spun tall tales about how heroic they were. And yet, those people in the photos weren't gonna take no shit from some uppity nigger who didn't know their fucking place. But see, they were never brave enough to stand up to the system that literally robbed them of their livelihood and freedom every day. You know, flashback a few centuries pre-colonialism, and you had the same lower middle class assholes in the streets of England bullying the fuck out of the poor back then too. Tax collectors and police beating the shit out of the indigent, and droves of lower middle class motherfuckers in the streets crying bloody murder against the accused poor and demanding justice for their outrage. She's a bloody witch, ain't she? He spoke against the church, heresy, burned him at the stake. Yo, this way of thinking, it happens in every society. If there were no such thing as race, there'd still be a bunch of cowardly motherfuckers just itching to categorically define everybody so that who or whatever represents them deserves more than everyone else. See, it's not just the people, it's not the people, it's how social structures emerge within the throes of social organization. Generally speaking, the lower middle class is just a bunch of malleable, attention-starved fags. It's a bunch of little insecure, fagly motherfuckers crying out for justice because the lowest class offends their sensibilities. And the truth of the matter is, the lower middle class is just whining because they're too afraid to admit to themselves or others that they don't want to be thought of as lowly themselves. They don't want to be in last place. See, I fucking know you. I fucking was you. And I don't have to call out any group. These are principles. All I have to do is describe the principle accurately, and people's own attitudes, actions, and behaviors define them accordingly. When you're tough against people who can't fight back on fair terms, you're a coward, plain and simple. When you're only a badass because you got a mob behind you, or a social system, or a bunch of social institutions backing you, then you're a coward. And I'm not saying that in judgment, I'm saying that as a former coward myself. Exploiting situational advantages you didn't earn isn't demonstrating strength or cunning. It's showing how much of a chicken shit you really are. If you really need to feel morally superior to someone, pick fights with people who can hit back just as hard or even harder than you can hit. See, a real racist, any person who really believes their people are inherently superior to all others, is never afraid to test that theory under any circumstance. Not just contests they create, control, manipulate, or think they can win. Any circumstance. If you're really superior to other groups, then it means you're physically better. It means you're mentally stronger and more capable. It means you look for fair contests and for people who have adequate skills and prep time so that you can compete against the very best. It means you want to see what their best can do because you know your best is better than their best. In fact, it means your middle should be better than their best. That's how a real racist should move. Hey nigger, I'm confident in knowing I'm better than you, but I want to give you a fair chance to prove I'm not. For the record, me being better than you doesn't have nothing to do with the achievements of my people. I'm inherently better than you as a person and not by extension to anything else. So I want you to take your time, gather your thoughts, present your skills, accomplishments, aptitudes, and potential, and let's compare. Context considered, I know I'm gonna win. If you're a real racist, then that's how you fucking do it. That's how you roll. Racists believe their group is superior and that they are superior because of their group. Superior people don't look for cheap wins. Cowards just want group advantages and discounts though. They want easy wins. If you're really confident in your people, it means you don't weaponize the system against people who can't fight back. You want to give them a fair crack at it, because your ability to excel should always trump theirs. Trump. And listen, I'm not suggesting for anyone to go fight the system, so don't take that away from anything I'm saying here. I don't encourage any sort of violence or upheaval or any of that shit, but what I'm saying instead is I'm telling people who need to see others suffer more than them just so they can feel safe and more important by comparison to be brave enough to admit that they're fucking faggles. If you wouldn't pull any of that shit against, people who can fight back, then you're not a hero, you're not a champion. I know! And if you're a racist or a nationalist watching this, then be sure to give this video a thumbs down and allow me to preempt your retort. Shut up, stupid nigger. We can find you and fuck your shit up. Make you wish for death, you stupid motherfucker. Yeah. That's right. That's exactly what I would have said to a foster kid. Shut up, you stupid foster kid, before I come over there and hit you. You're so cowardly. So cowardly. Prove you're brave by having a fucking honest conversation. Prove you're brave by admitting, yeah, I'm morbidly terrified of being in last place. Let's start there. The thing cowards fear more than anything is truth. They will hide behind stories. They will barricade themselves in cultures and mythologies and skewed factoids and faux statistics. Anything to avoid looking in a fucking mirror. Yo, this dude I went to school with back in Ohio recently unfriended me on Facebook because, me being more intelligent than him and black was like a cardinal sin in his eyes. He literally claimed I might be the Antichrist for demonstrating above average critical thinking skill. One day during one of his many attempts to humble me, I was explaining how racism is fundamentally coward, and he literally asked me, what's wrong with that? And, I never got back to answering his question. But it is a good question. What's wrong with being a coward? Well, answering that question from a mechanical viewpoint, the problem with being a coward is that regardless of who you are or what your lot in life is, you're always going to be up against a parasitic system. And see, the top will always take more from the middle than the middle can take from the bottom as a matter of resource distribution. In fact, the top takes from both the middle and the bottom. And maybe you're okay with being exploited so long as you get to beat up on and feel superior to people you've been trained to think are beneath you. But your children and their children and their children are going to feel the brunt of your cowardice. And I don't know, maybe one day they might wake up and find that somehow a few 100 million people are mysteriously trillions and trillions of dollars in debt to a thing they can't quantify or get a fucking fix on. Now, wouldn't that be something? Could you even imagine? But back to me being a cowardly preteen and adolescent. See, the thing is, back then I really just wanted to be part of the group. I wanted to feel like I belonged and like my family had my back and cared about my interests and needs. I just wanted to feel safe and loved, and unfortunately, all I got in the end was an insatiable hunger for validation and the stupid need to see other people hurting worse than me, just so I could feel safe by comparison. In that situation, that's about the closest I ever came to feeling love and safety from within the power structure. By the time I got into high school and started masturbating to relieve some of that pent-up aggression and getting attention from a few girls here and there and exposure to different people from different walks of life, it turns out I had talent all along. Right? It turns out I was intelligent, not just like intelligent, but like make people uncomfortable intelligent. The thing is, I never would have known any of that was in me if I stayed content to live my life as a petty tyrant. If my aspirations had never grown beyond wanting to be an enforcer for a power structure. And as much as I would love to call racist and nationalists every dirty name in the book, I fucking can't, because like I said, I get it, I was you. They're like a bunch of little faggot ass 13 and 14-year-old Donald Kings. Even people who are established within the power structure who still believe that groups are what define people think like fucking cowards. They still think something other than talent and ability alone should determine the order of deserving. And the question I often ask myself is, if there were enough of me back then, like, if I could have made carbon copies of myself and had enough time to execute, what would be the extent of my aggression? Would I have formed my own clan or a military police force or even a whole predatory social system? If my aggression were allowed to go unchecked, would my desire to assimilate into and protect power structures have become a systemic phenomenon? See, I'm fortunate because the circumstance of growing up necessarily drew me away from that mode of thinking. But back then, when I was at my lowest, if I could have built a cocoon of cowardice and made a bunch of carbon copies of myself who reflected my values and beliefs back to me and told me I was being brave and heroic for hitting people who couldn't hit back, would I have ever changed? Would I have ever found my true voice and talents? And see, honestly, I don't know if I would have. And that's what pisses me off about racists. They remind me of me as my weakest self. Edna, Abdullah, William, Tyrese, Xavier, Antonio, T, LaShawn, Kendall, Govana, Erica, sometimes Alonzo, Felicia's son Darius. I'm so incredibly sorry, guys. I'm embarrassed. I didn't know what I was doing. I know you guys had your own thing going on, and I'm so sorry I added to your burden. If it's any sort of consolation, life gave it back to me double, triple fold sometime, and I spend most of my days trying to bring love and peace into the world. You never know how bad shit looks on you until you see it smeared on someone else, and I'm sorry. I really am.